The baby wasn't even born yet when they told me to move out. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because I had just folded 3 loads of laundry, still warm from the dryer, and was setting the crib sheets neatly in a basket labeled Nora's Nursery in soft pink script. I thought I was being helpful. I thought that was still my role in their life. Helper, mother, presence. They were standing by the dining table, both of them. Arms crossed but faces trying not to look harsh. "We need that room for the baby," she said, not a question, not a maybe. Just said it like it was settled. He didn't speak for a long time, just nodded once. His silence always said more than her words. He looked past me when he finally added, "It's not forever. Just until things settle down." But that was the moment it settled. For me, everything. I saw the truth between them, the plan they'd likely been mulling over for weeks. My things, boxed up in their minds already. My presence trimmed out of the frame like a crooked edge in a family photo. I didn't say much. I asked where they thought I would go. She gave a small shrug and said, gently, too gently, that she'd found a place I could afford. A studio apartment on the edge of town. Quiet, clean, close to the pharmacy. She made it sound like a favor. I could feel her pride in the arrangement. A solution that required no real cost from them. They had printed out a listing. She slid it across the table like a menu. I glanced at it, didn't touch it. I remember seeing the word cozy in the description and thinking how that word has become code for cramped and lonely. They waited for me to nod. It's all they needed. My nod. My compliance. My slow fade. I walked out of the room and went to fold the rest of the towels. It wasn't until that evening that I allowed myself to feel it. After they'd gone out for dinner, one of their weekly date nights I always encouraged, always babysat for, always arranged dinner around. I stood in the nursery. A little nightlight she'd picked out cast stars on the wall. I sat on the edge of the twin daybed I'd been sleeping on since I moved in after my surgery last year. When she said, "Of course you'll stay as long as you need, Mom. Your family." That bed would be gone by next week. My name was already being erased from the mailbox. They hadn't said it outright, but I saw it in her eyes. I was too much. A tripping hazard. An obligation. A voice that didn't fit the new color palette of their life. I didn't cry, didn't raise my voice, or plead for understanding. I didn't remind them of the mortgage I had paid off early so they could start fresh. I didn't mention the Christmases I made possible, or the weeks I spent caring for her after the miscarriage when she barely spoke. I didn't say a thing. Instead, I packed 2 bags that night. One with clothes. The other with documents. My birth certificate, the deed to the land in Wyoming my grandmother left me. My bank ledgers, the notebook I'd been quietly writing in for the last 8 months. I zipped them both up carefully. No rush, no sound, just breath. At midnight. I walked out the back door. No one saw me go. I left the porch light on. They'd find the letter in the morning. Folded on the kitchen counter beneath the ceramic rooster. Paperweight I'd given them as a housewarming gift. They always hated that thing. I didn't write much in the letter. Just told them not to worry, told them I'd be fine, told them not to call. The motel room was cold when I arrived. I had to fiddle with the heater for 5 minutes before it coughed itself to life. The walls were thin and smelled faintly of stale cigarette smoke, though the sign outside said non-smoking. There was a single painting above the bed, a lake at sunset, mass-printed and indifferent. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at it for a long time, not really seeing anything. Then I opened my bag, pulled out the recorder, and began to speak. Not because I needed to be heard, but because I needed to remember. I had a voice. I wasn't always this quiet. There were years when I filled the house with noise. Birthday songs, burnt toast, bathwater splashing onto tile floors. Laughter that sometimes turned sharp but always came back around to warmth. I was a woman who made things work. Swall? Doing it when Thomas was born, I thought the world had cracked open just for me. I'd never seen anything as small or urgent or mine. He had these fists he wouldn't unclench for days. Like even then, he knew how tightly you had to hold on. I was 24, no money, no help, and a husband who disappeared the year after. He left a note. Something about needing freedom. He took our car and never looked back. I didn't file for divorce for almost 4 years. I kept thinking he might wake up and remember, but Thomas gave me a reason to stay standing. We lived in a little walk-up apartment near the train tracks. I used to sing to him when the trains passed, so he wouldn't be scared. I'd hold him to my chest and hum nonsense melodies that only he and I understood. He used to sleep curled up like a question mark, always reaching for me in his dreams. I worked nights at a diner, came home smelling like coffee and onions, but he never minded. In the mornings, I'd pack his lunchbox with notes, little scraps of paper with stars drawn on them or reminders that he was brave. That I was proud. I never missed a school meeting, not one. Sat through every play, even the ones where he only had one line. I clapped harder than anyone. He'd roll his eyes, embarrassed, but he always looked for me in the crowd. Every time. And when he brought her home, Marissa was happy for him, truly. She had that high cheekbone politeness that makes you think. She's warm until you spend more time with her. But she seemed good for him, grounded, a little sharp around the edges, but so was I once. They got married in the backyard. I strung the lights myself, made centerpieces out of mason jars and baby's breath. I gave them everything I had saved, every penny from the account I'd been keeping for a rainy day. They never asked for it. But they didn't say no either. When they bought the house, they invited me to stay just for a while until I got back on my feet. I had just come out of surgery then. A hysterectomy I didn't talk much about. I told them I was fine, but the truth is I felt hollow for months. Like something essential had been scooped out of me. They set me up in the nursery. It was supposed to be temporary. A soft mattress, a small window, a closet full of their holiday decorations I didn't mind sharing space with. I told myself I'd be out by Christmas, but Christmas came and I was still sore, still tired. Then winter turned to spring, and she had the first scare. They thought they might lose the baby. I stayed longer, I cooked, I cleaned, I left space. I didn't invite myself into their arguments or their plans. I just wanted to help, to be useful, to feel for once. Like I wasn't an extra page in someone else's story. Sometimes Thomas would leave early in the mornings, and I'd catch a glimpse of him from the window. Coffee in hand, eyes on his phone, always rushing. I wondered when. He stopped looking up, when my face became part of the wallpaper. He didn't say much to me by then. Polite, distracted, like I was a well-meaning stranger who overstayed her welcome. He hugged me on my birthday that year, quick and distracted. Said he'd Venmo me a little something. I didn't have Venmo. Still, Dan single quotes T dot the distance crept in, like cold air through a cracked window. I kept patching it with blankets and good intentions. I thought maybe once the baby came, once the sleepless nights hit, they'd see I was still needed. But Marissa never asked for help. Not really. She liked things on her terms, me included. If I left a dish in the wrong spot or folded the towels the wrong way, she'd quietly refold them. No words, just correction. She called me Mom in front of Thomas. But behind closed doors, I was Linda. Or sometimes just her. I wrote about it in the notebook. The small one with the navy blue cover and the broken elastic band. I jot down little things each day. Nothing dramatic. Just what I noticed. What I felt. What I remembered from before. I wrote, she smiles with her mouth, not her eyes. He forgot to ask if I took my medication today. Okay? They never look at the photos on the hallway wall. I didn't realize it at the time. But I was documenting my own erasure. The things I gave up. The space I made. The love I tried to offer in silence. And somewhere along the way, I disappeared so slowly that even I didn't notice Dot until that Thursday. Until she said the words, "We need that room for the baby." And I realized it had already happened. They just needed me gone to make it official. It was the paperwork that told me the truth. Not the tone of her voice, not the absence of mine. Not even the way Thomas didn't meet my eyes when I passed him his favorite cereal one morning and he muttered, "Thanks," like it was a formality. It was the envelope I found tucked into the bottom of the mail stack. A plain white thing addressed to her, but half opened, probably ripped in a hurry. I didn't mean to look at it. I was sorting bills like I always did. Electric, gas. One from the insurance company. I opened that one, assuming it was mine. It wasn't. It was theirs. And it had my name in it, there in small, precise letters under the section titled Household Occupants. It listed the new insurance coverage for the home: fire, theft, flood, all the little disasters you can see and itemize. And there was a note next to my name: non-paying adult resident. Will vacate by June 30th. I stared at it for a long time. It was April. I hadn't known there was a deadline. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to breathe. There was a hum. In my ears, I couldn't shake. Not quite rage, not even grief. Just a thrum of knowing. She had called me a blessing months earlier. A help. She'd put her hand on mine and told me how lucky they were to have me. And then, quietly, off the record, she signed a policy that confirmed I was a liability. I was something to be removed. I didn't mention it. Not that day, not the next. I folded the letter and slipped it into the back of my notebook behind a grocery list and a page titled Things to Take If I Go. I'd started that list months before without fully admitting it to myself. It had grown quietly, like ivy through cracks. I wrote passport jewelry from Mom's Social, security card notebooks deed from Wyoming. Added the insurance letter to the list that evening, and I watched them closer after that. They weren't cruel. Not openly. That's the hardest kind of betrayal, the one without bruises. They still smiled at me. Joe still asked if I wanted tea. Stowe kissed my cheek on his way out the door. But it all had the feel of performance, of roles rehearsed, until they could be played without thinking. One night I overheard them, not on purpose. I was in the hallway, coming back from the bathroom. Their door was slightly ajar. She said, softly but firmly, "I just don't want her here when the baby comes. It's too much. Need space." He didn't argue. He said, "I'll handle it." That was worse than yelling. That was the sound of decision. I stood there, barefoot, hands curled at my sides like I used to when I was a girl trying not to cry in school. I went back to my room and sat on the bed and looked around at the things I'd kept so carefully, the lavender sachet in the drawer. The photo of Thomas as a boy in the frame he painted with glitter glue. My Bible with the spine cracked from years of Sundays. None of it had weight anymore. It all felt like borrowed cloth. They were going to ask me to go. I knew that now. But they didn't want to be the bad ones. They wanted me to go willingly, quietly, like a breeze leaving a window. So I gave them what they wanted, at least on the surface. I started smiling more. I folded her maternity clothes without being asked. I restocked the pantry. I even bought a little stuffed bear with the baby's name embroidered across its belly. Nora, the name I once mentioned loving. Years ago. Before she was even in the picture, she thanked me and placed it high on a shelf like a museum piece. I kept waiting for Thomas to say something, to defend me, to speak up, to remember who raised him. But he never did. He kept his eyes down. Too worked. Late he kissed her belly and whispered promises to a child who hadn't yet arrived. Promises he never made to me, never kept for me. One morning I found the house key missing from the hook where mine always hung. I asked her about it, casually. "Oh, we're just cutting back on spares," she said. For safety, I nodded. I didn't mention that I'd noticed the passwords had changed. 2 on the Wi-Fi. On the family calendar I used to help coordinate appointments. They were locking me out one silent click at a time. I went back to my room and opened my notebook. Wrote, "They want me gone, but they want to feel good about it. They want me grateful for being erased. They want a clean conscience." I stopped waiting for them to say it out loud. They'd already said it in every way that mattered. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was accepting that they'd already let me go. They just hadn't said it with words. I think I knew long before the envelope, before the insurance form, before the missing key and the repainted nursery. I think I felt it in the way they stopped, asking if I needed anything. In the way their voices dropped in volume when I entered the room. In the quiet little recalibrations of home that didn't include me. I used to believe that love meant staying, no matter what. That if you just kept showing up, eventually they'd see you again. But some kinds of love go blind. They stop noticing. They become convenience obligation. A thing you step over to get to where you're going. I had stepped over myself for years. That week I moved like a ghost. Polite, helpful, still. I made sure the kitchen was stocked. I deep cleaned the bathroom. Tiles. I updated the emergency contact list and put it on the fridge. Her mother now listed as first. She didn't notice I had removed myself entirely. I smiled when they came into the room. I listened when she talked about the nursery's color scheme. I watched them open the new stroller, fawning over its cup holders and adjustable sunshade. As if the arrival of an infant would make them suddenly whole and kind. But inside me, something had gone very quiet. And that quiet was not weakness. It was decision. I took out my notebook and tore out the old list, the one titled Things to Take If I Go, and rewrote it on clean paper. Not as a maybe. As a plan, I gave myself a date. I circled it in red. Ink, May 14th. I had no job lined up, no friends I could stay with. I was 59 and my left knee ached in the rain and my savings were thin. But I had one small card left to play. The land in Wyoming, it wasn't worth much. Remote, unbuilt, just acres of wind and silence. My grandmother left it to me. In a will that surprised everyone. I'd never even seen it in person. But the deed had my name on it and a number to call. I spent 2 nights looking up the county clerk's office and scanning maps. Just knowing it was there made me feel steadier. It was mine. It's untouched, unwanted by anyone else. A place where no one could ask me to leave. I called the office from the car one afternoon while Marissa was at her prenatal appointment and Thomas was out. The woman on the line was kind. She confirmed the title was still in my name. I asked what I needed to do if I wanted to sell it or lease it, or even just visit. She paused and said, honestly, if it were me, I'd keep it. Even empty land gets more valuable when no one's watching. That stayed with me. Empty land. It's more valuable when no one's watching. I hung up and sat in the car for a long time. That night, I went through my documents. I sorted everything into 2 neat folders. One labeled Keep, one labeled Leave Behind. I slid photos out of frames and tucked them into an envelope. I folded 2 letters Thomas wrote me in elementary school. One where he said I was the best. Mom in the universe. I pressed them flat, smoothing out the creases. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I felt something else. Not joy. Not even peace. But clarity. It was a kind of shedding. Of skin. Of history. Of noise. And then came the dream. In it, I was walking down a long hallway, barefoot. The walls were lined with photographs, but none of the faces had eyes. It's just smooth, blank skin, where sight used to be. I kept calling out, but no one turned. Not even Thomas. He was there, holding the baby. He looked straight past me and said she was just taking up space. I woke up sweating, but not afraid. Just ... sure. The next morning, I began packing the small things. 1 suitcase. 1 SATCHEL. I labeled them discreetly and hid them behind the winter coats in the hall closet. No one noticed. She was too busy writing. Outbirth plans and shopping for bassinets. He was on his phone most evenings, looking more tired than present. They had made a life I was not part of. I was a shadow that had lingered too long. I began backing up my documents to a USB drive. I wrote a short note to the bank and had it ready for mailing. I sorted passwords, canceled magazine subscriptions, updated my pharmacy address to general delivery, and each night. I wrote a little more in the notebook. Things I wanted to remember. Things no one else would care to. May 14th came closer. I circled. The date again, darker this time. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even escape. It was return. To myself, to silence that belonged to me and not to their avoidance, to the sound of my own steps. Unmonitored. That was the moment I stopped asking to be seen. That was the moment I began walking away. The night I left, it rained, soft, unhurried. The kind of rain that doesn't drench, but seeps slowly into everything. I sat on the edge of the daybed in the nursery room for a long while, my hands folded in my lap. The zipped bags beside me like loyal dogs waiting at the door. There wasn't much to take. 2 changes of clothes, my toothbrush. A worn copy of Persuasion I had read so often the spine had unglued. The deed to the Wyoming land, printed and reprinted until the ink started to fade. The notebook, thick now, with my own handwriting. A living record of vanishing dot, everything else stayed. I left the lavender sachet in the drawer, the photo of Thomas. As a boy, the one with his missing front teeth and lopsided smile, I placed gently on the shelf above the crib. That was for her, not him. Maybe one day she would notice the frame was different. Maybe not. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter, held down by the ceramic rooster paperweight. I folded it twice, sharp and neat, and wrote their names at the top. Just their names, no salutation. They would recognize the handwriting. Thomas learned to read from letters I wrote him in his lunchbox. Inside, I kept it simple. Told them not. Too worried, told them I'd arranged everything. Said I was safe and didn't want to be found. That I needed time and space. The same things they asked of me. I told them I understood, even if I didn't agree. I didn't ask them to understand me in return. That was no longer something I craved. I left my phone on the charger, wiped clean. I'd bought a new one the week before, paid in cash at a strip mall store 2 towns over. I gave it a new number and added only one contact. The Wyoming County Clerk. The motel was 23 miles away, just off a quiet stretch of highway. The kind of place you book for vacation. The room smelled of lemon cleaner and wear. The curtains were floral, sun-faded. There was a small desk and a lamp that flickered when you turned it too quickly, but it was mine. I sat at that desk with my notebook and opened to a blank page. I wrote, May 14th, I kept my promise. It's myself. They will wake up to a house that is quieter, but not in the way they wanted. That motel room became a kind of sanctuary. The silence was full of weight, but not the heavy kind. It was clean silence, unwatched. I moved slowly, made tea in the little machine by the bathroom sink, ate crackers in bed, a cup, my bags packed, not out of fear, but as a reminder. I was no longer fixed in place. The first night, I didn't. Sleep, not fully. I lay on my side and listened to the rain tap against the glass. I thought about all the times I had stayed in marriages, in houses, in roles that made me disappear. I thought about how easy it is to mistake being useful. For being loved up by morning, I felt lighter. I walked to the front office and asked for another week. Paid in cash. The woman behind the counter didn't ask questions. She handed me a new key card with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but it didn't matter. She didn't owe me warmth. She gave me space. That was enough. On the second day, I called a lawyer. Not for revenge. Just for clarity, I had found his name online weeks earlier. A solo practitioner in estate planning who offered consultations for $50. I told him I wanted to update my will. I said it calmly, like I was ordering groceries. We met in a small office above a nail salon. I wore my best sweater and carried the folder with all my documents. He listened, nodded, asked the right questions. Didn't pry. I made it clear that I wanted everything I owned, what little it was, to go to an educational foundation for single mothers. I named no family members as beneficiaries. I kept my voice steady when he asked if I had children. I said I used to, and that was all. He didn't press. I left the office with new paperwork, freshly notarized. I tucked it into the folder and clutched it close. It weighed less than an apology, but more than a memory. That night, sat on the edge of the motel bed and opened the voice recorder. I spoke softly. My throat felt raw, though I hadn't spoken all day. I said, I am no one's burden now, not even my own. And then I let the silence return. No one came looking. Not that day. Not the next. I imagined them finding the letter, the rooster. Her face tightening, mouth opening in shock, but not knowing what to say. I imagined the baby's room, now truly empty. I imagined them trying to figure out what I'd taken with me. What I'd left behind. The truth is, I left everything. That didn't see me, and I took everything that did. The messages started on the 3rd day. The motel phone rang just after 7 in the morning. I let it go. No one calls that number except the front desk, and they hadn't. I asked when I went to get my tea. The woman behind the counter looked up my room number and shook her head. No calls from us. I knew then later that day, I drove 10 miles east, paid $5 at a library, and logged into the email I hadn't checked in weeks. It was full, my name in subject lines, all caps. Ree, please just let us know you're okay. Ree, Thomas is worried. Ree, this isn't fair, Mom. There were voice messages too. I hadn't turned on the phone since I left, but I could hear them in my head anyway. His voice would be flat at first, trying to sound calm, then louder, rushed, then quiet again, wounded. He'd use the word confused a lot, maybe even concerned. He'd say things like, this wasn't how we wanted it to go, as if any version of it would have felt different to me. Marissa wrote once, just once. Hers was the shortest. We didn't mean to push you away. Please tell us what you need. I read it twice. The first time, I almost believed it. The second time, I remembered the insurance letter, the missing key. The voice I heard in the hallway saying, I just don't want her here when the baby comes. That didn't sound like not meaning to. I didn't reply. I shut the computer and left the library that afternoon. I drove past the hospital just to see it. It's the one where I had my surgery last year. I'd gone in alone back then, telling them not to bother, not to miss work. They'd sent flowers, the cheap kind, with carnations and a printed card that said, feel better soon. TNM. I remembered lying in that bed, still groggy, watching. The nurse placed the vase on the farthest windowsill like it didn't belong, even back then. I had started disappearing. Now they were the ones scrambling to find me. I imagined them scrolling through old bank statements, wondering where the Wyoming deed had gone. I pictured her calling the post office, checking forwarding addresses, maybe even asking neighbors if they'd seen me leave. They hadn't. I was careful. I knew they'd call the police eventually, if only to make it look right. I'd prepared for that. The letter I left was calm, deliberate. No threat, no drama. Just distance. Enough to assure them I wasn't in danger. Just done. I checked the local news that evening. No reports. No pleas. No missing persons alert. They didn't go that far? Of course not. That would mean admitting something, saying it out loud. No, they wanted me back, but quietly, with no fanfare. Just back where I used to be. In the little bed by the nursery, folding towels and keeping out of the way. Smiling and grateful. They didn't want me lost, just invisible again. Instead, they got silence. Real silence. The kind that makes you question the shape of things. I turned the phone on once just to check the time. 22 missed calls, 11 voicemails, 5 from Thomas, 3 from her, the rest from a number I didn't recognize. Maybe her mother, maybe the bank. I didn't listen to them. I powered the phone off and slid it back into the drawer. On. The 6th day, I got a text. It came through the motel's front desk email. The clerk printed it out and handed it to me in a manila envelope. It said, "We're worried. We just want to talk. The baby's coming soon." I folded the page once and placed it in my notebook. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Their panic wasn't mine to hold anymore. The motel walls were thin. Could hear the room next door. A man with a smoker's cough and a TV that never turned off, but it was my room, my space. And I learned something in that quiet. There is power in letting people wonder. There is strength in not replying, in refusing to fill the silence they created by the end of the week. The calls slowed down. I knew what stage they were in. I've lived it. First confusion, then panic, then blame. Eventually, they'd land on anger. Maybe they already had. I imagined her saying she overreacted. We didn't tell her to leave, we just needed space. I imagined him pacing, rubbing his temple, like he did when he didn't want to be the bad guy, saying, "This is just mom being dramatic again. She'll come back." They hadn't learned that when you erase someone long enough, they don't return as the same shape. If they return at all, I went to sleep that night without locking the door. Not because I was safe, but because I had nothing left to steal. I found the cottage by accident. It sat at the edge of a gravel road that didn't have a name on the GPS. It's past a stretch of cottonwood trees and a rusted fence that seemed more symbolic. Then secure. The sign out front, "Read for rent," small quiet space in black marker, crooked and weather-worn. It felt like a note left just for me. I pulled over and sat in the car for 10 minutes before I even called the number. The woman who answered had a voice like dry leaves, soft, a little rough around the edges. She said her name was Annie, and the place used to be her uncle's until he passed. Said it wasn't fancy, but the roof didn't leak and the heater worked. I told her I didn't need fancy, just quiet. She met me an hour later with a thermos of coffee and keys on a yellow ribbon. She didn't ask questions, just looked me up and down like she recognized something in me. Maybe the silence, maybe the absence. She said, "You look tired," then added, "You can stay as long as you want." I moved in the next day. The cottage was one room, really. A bed tucked against the wall, a tiny kitchen with a chipped enamel sink, and a reading nook by the window that looked out onto a patch of wild grass and sky. No curtains. No neighbors. Just wind and the occasional crow sitting on the fence post. Like a sentry. I cleaned the windows first. Then I scrubbed the floor, even though it was already clean. There was something about washing a place with your own hands that made it feel yours. I unpacked my bags slowly. The blue notebook, the deed, the worn paperback. I placed each one carefully in the small wooden drawer beside the bed, as if they were sacred. It's because they were. For the first few days, I didn't go anywhere. I drank tea, watched the light shift, across the room, and wrote without purpose. Not even about them, just small things. The shape of the trees, the sound the gravel made under tires. It's the way my body had stopped tensing at every creak. On the 4th day, I met Rose. She was 7, maybe 8. Her grandfather lived in the next farmhouse down. And she'd come walking through the tall grass with a stick and a purple scarf tied around her waist like a cape. She stopped when she saw me on the porch. "You live here now?" I nodded. Her eyes were bright, too bright to be afraid of anything. She said, "This house used to be sad, but I think you're good at fixing sad things." Then she handed me a rock, smooth, white, cool to the touch, and said it was lucky. After that, she visited every few days. Brought me dandelions, drawings, once even a stale cookie wrapped in tinfoil. I made her hot cocoa and let her pick a book from the shelf I'd started filling with paperbacks from the secondhand store in town. We didn't talk much, which suited us both. But when she left, the house didn't feel empty anymore. Annie would check in once a week, bring eggs or firewood. She didn't hover, just made sure I was breathing and not too cold. She'd sit on the porch steps and talk about her dogs or the raccoon that kept getting into her compost. Once she said, "We all end up somewhere, whether we meant to or not. Might as well make it somewhere soft." I wrote that down in the notebook. The town nearby was small. One grocery store, one diner, one church with a crooked steeple and an always unlocked door. I'd go in sometimes, sit in the last pew, and just breathe. I didn't pray. Not in the way I used to. I just listened to the quiet. I started sleeping through the night again. No creaking floorboards down the hall. No footsteps that paused outside. My door. No worry that I'd left a dish in the wrong place or forgotten a polite smile at the right moment. I belonged to no one now. And somehow, it made me feel more whole than I'd ever been. One afternoon, I opened the notebook to the very first page. Back when I was still in their house, still writing about being careful and invisible. I read my own words like they belonged to someone else. A woman who folded herself small, just to be kept. A woman who believed that endurance was love. I turned the page and wrote something new. Today I boiled water just for me. I salted it how I like. I made potatoes the way I used to, before anyone told me to stop. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait for thanks. I didn't need to. That night, I placed the smooth white rock on the windowsill and watched the sky go violet with dusk. Somewhere, far away, they were probably still wondering, still checking voicemail, still telling themselves stories about what happened. But here, in this cottage with one drawer and one lamp and one small life, I had everything I needed and nothing ID'd. Single quotes, he found me in early autumn. The grass outside. The cottage had turned gold and brittle, and the wind came sharper through the cracks in the window pane. I was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea in my hands, watching a squirrel dig holes it would later forget. When I saw the car come down the gravel road, it was too clean for this place. A silver sedan with a cautious crawl, like it didn't belong here and knew it. I felt something in my chest fold in on itself. Not fear, not regret. Just stillness. He stepped out slowly, same jacket he always wore when he didn't know what to say. Hands shoved in pockets. Hair longer than I remembered. He looked thinner, older. But maybe that was just how I saw him now, without the film of closeness, without the warmth I used to drape over him like a blanket. He said my name once, quiet, almost uncertain. I didn't answer, just looked at him. Let the silence sit where it needed to. He took a step closer, then stopped, eyes scanning the porch, the chipped table. The single chair beside me that I didn't offer. This place is nice, peaceful. I nodded once. Nothing more. He stood there, trying to find the edges of the version of me that stood before him. The one he didn't know. The one he'd built without expecting to ever face. We didn't know where you'd gone, he said. Oressa thought. Maybe Wyoming? I remembered something about land. I didn't correct him. She had the baby. He added Nora, healthy, 6 pounds, 10 ounces. I waited. We've been ... trying to figure things out, he said. Things have been ... hard. The house is quiet without you. I took a sip of my tea. The steam rose between us like a veil. He shifted on his feet, uncomfortable in a silence he couldn't control. Finally, he pulled something from his pocket. A photograph. I could see the edge of it from where I sat. Nora wrapped in a yellow blanket, red-faced and new. I didn't reach for it. He held it out, but I didn't take it. I didn't need to. See the baby to know she was real? She's got your eyes, he said, a little desperate now. You'd like her? I didn't answer. There was a long pause. Wind rustled through the cottonwoods. A crow called once, like punctuation. He looked down at his shoes, then back up. Mom, I'm sorry. I know we didn't handle things right. I know it. Probably felt like we pushed you out. Probably he caught that. Flinched. You were always there for me. I didn't forget that. I think maybe you did. He went quiet. Let the words settle. I'm not here to beg, he said finally. I just thought maybe we could talk. I tilted my head slightly. I am talking, I mean really talk. I gave you years of that. You weren't listening. His face crumpled in the way only someone who has started to understand can. Like grief arrived. Late to the party, confused but determined. She misses you too, he said. We both do. I looked at him then fully. Not as the boy I raised, not as the man who once held my hand in the hospital waiting room, just as a person, someone I used to know. I believe that, I said. He stepped forward again, hopeful. So maybe dash no? Just that calm final dot. He stopped. I'm not angry, I said. Not anymore. But I'm not coming back. He nodded slowly, like he'd rehearsed this moment with a different ending. You left without saying goodbye, he said. It hurt. I know. Why? Castaigne was killing me in pieces. Okay, and you'd made peace with that. He looked down at the porch floor, then back at me. Can I call you? It's just to check in. No. Can I write? You can. Will you read it? I didn't answer. He looked down again, then folded the photo back into his pocket. I should go. I didn't stop him. He hesitated at the steps, waiting for something, forgiveness maybe, or softness. I don't know. I gave him nothing, except this. As he reached his car door, I said, tell her the baby's beautiful. Tell her I hope she becomes a woman who never has to shrink to be loved. He paused, nodded, and got into the car. I sat there long after the dust had settled. Then I picked up my cup, now cold, and took the last sip. Bitter, clean. He had come with his apology, and I had let it pass through me without swallowing it. That, I think, is what peace feels like. The air turned colder after he left. The trees went bare almost overnight, like they'd been waiting for a cue. Every morning, frost curled along the window glass, tracing delicate lines that melted by noon. I started using the small heater in the corner, the one with the rattle I found strangely comforting. I wrapped myself in thick socks and knit sweaters. I boiled water just to warm the air. Outside, the wild grass bent under the weight of the season, and I let it. I stopped trying to sweep the porch or rake the leaves. It didn't matter. I was learning to live with what falls. The quiet came back. It settled differently this time, less like emptiness, more like breath. He hadn't broken it when he came. Not really. He just tested its weight, like someone knocking on a door they no longer have a key to. And when I didn't answer the way he hoped, he stepped back. He hasn't written. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. I won't be waiting. I wake up earlier now. I stretch slowly, let the cold hit my skin without flinching. I drink tea with too much. Honey, I talk to Rose when she walks by, her scarf now a faded ribbon tied around her coat sleeve. She brought me a pino cone yesterday, said it was from her collection of secret things. I told her I'd keep it on the windowsill. Did some. Afternoons, I take the long way to the store, the road that curves past the church and the old barn with its collapsed roof. There's a tree there, a maple, gnarled and hollow in. I leave small things in it now and then, a dried leaf, a folded note. Once, a ribbon I used to wear in my hair when Thomas was small. It feels like giving something back to the world that made me. I haven't spoken my son's name in weeks. I wrote it once in the notebook and then crossed it out. Not out of anger, just ... quiet. He takes up less space in me now, less ache, less noise, that the cottage has become a map of my own making. The nail by the door where I hang my keys. The mug I use every morning, a blanket that smells like cedar. And time. I know the sound each floorboard makes. I know how the light shifts by hour, by cloud, by season. It feels like knowing myself. I've stopped wearing the watch I kept for years. I no longer need the ticking to remind me I exist. The deed to the Wyoming land still sits in the drawer, but I haven't decided what to do with it. Maybe one day I'll go. Maybe I won't. I like knowing it's there, unseen, undisturbed. A kind of promise that no one else can rewrite. Sometimes I think about my younger self, the woman who stayed too long in rooms that grew smaller every year, who folded her needs into quieter and quieter corners. I want to reach back through time and tell her that disappearing isn't noble. That silence, when forced, becomes a cage. But then I remember that she brought me here. She's the reason I can sit on this porch now, notebook in hand, and write without apology. She didn't abandon me. She endured until I was ready to arrive today. I made a pot of soup and ate every spoonful without offering it to anyone else. Oh yeah. I sat at the small table and let the steam rise into my face, warm and forgiving. I didn't think about whether someone else would like the seasoning. I didn't set extra plates out of habit. I was not preparing for company. I was feeding myself later. I opened the drawer and took out the notebook. I turned to the first page, the list titled Things to Take If I Go. I read each item slowly. My passport, my grandmother's deed, my notebook, my own name. Then I tore the page out, folded it once, held it over the candle, watched it curl into blackened lace. I didn't need it anymore. I was no longer planning to leave. I was already here. The truth is, I did love them. And maybe I still do, in the way you can love a house long after it is burned. You remember where the light used to fall? You remember the sound, the stairs? But you don't go back. Not to live. Maybe someday Nora will ask about me. Maybe she'll wonder who the woman in the photo is, the one on the shelf with her father. Both of them laughing long before the nursery was painted. Maybe they'll tell her I left. Maybe they'll say I was tired. Maybe they'll say nothing at all. But I hope someone tells her that I once made blueberry pancakes on Saturday mornings. That I held her father's hand when he was sick. I folded his clothes with lavender because he said it made them smell like the sky. And if no one tells her, that's all right too, because I will have told it here in pages and tea, cups and pine cones and soup bowls, in silence that belongs to no one but me this morning. I wrote myself a letter, short, folded into an envelope I had to dust off from years in a drawer. I wrote, "You did not vanish. You were simply not where they left you." And I signed it with my full name. No titles, no roles, just me. Then I placed it on the porch railing and let the wind take it. This time I decide who gets to call me anything else.